Alright, so I wanted to go over some of the differences between day and night lighting. Before I have some pre-rendered stuff to show you guys. Before I do that, I just want to show you, like, this is my scene. It's not super pretty. This thing is literally just here to cast nice shadows. There's different ways to do that. I was just being lazy, so this is what I did. It's literally just like a weird plane where I cut out some of the plane. Then I have some candles and a dagger and whatever on the table. So I have some different versions of day and night lighting. And for the record, the candle and any of the textures, I've not changed any of the settings of. These stay consistent throughout the whole thing. The only thing I'm changing really is the lighting sort of shining into the scene as if we're like coming through a window or whatever. So anywho, this is the day lighting. It has the weird sort of blind shadows as if there were blinds, which doesn't really make a lot of sense given the time period I was sort of shooting for when making this, but whatever. But it just sort of like adds interesting sort of lighting effects, so I add them in oftentimes because I think they're cool. And this is basically just an area light shining directly into the space. I also, oops, I did go ahead and sort of switch things around in the next one, so it's the same light as before with the same intensity. I just changed the positioning of the light a little bit so that the difference between day and night lighting, the direction of the light was a little bit more different. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. I'll just run through the day and night and then sort of do a comparison. But yes, I mean, we still have, like I said, same intensity light. This one you can see the candle a little bit more, which is kind of nice. Like you see that sort of warm spot on the wall. In the next version of day lighting, I added a fill light into here because I was like, you know what, this is maybe a little bit aggressive in terms of the amount of shadow. Like, I feel like there'd be some more bounce light, and this shadow is just like really over intense. So I popped in another fill light on the side here, which in retrospect is like a little bit aggressive. But you still, one thing I actually really like how this turned out is like the candle where you get that like little warm glow. But it's not, and you see it on the walls, but it's not like super intense. Like it takes the focus away from the candle a lot when you don't have that really dark area around the candle. And then the daggers aren't super prominent. I just sort of threw them in there and gave them a random texture. But it sort of allows your eye to see them sooner, I guess. But yeah, so I mean, that's pretty much the different versions of the day lighting that I have. So you can see in this case, again, how the light positioning kind of makes a difference between the two versions of this and then the fill light. So for the night lighting, this is, for the record, what the scene looks like with just a candle and no additional lights in the scene at all. And then this one I've gone through and I just added in, and there's actually a fun tidbit about this. I've had the flame casting shadows, so I turned that off in my next renders, but that's why you see this weird little flame chill in there. But I've gone through and I was like, this is a little bit dark. I do like the highlights that are sort of coming in this area. But what if I added, you know, a little bit of like physical sky or something like that? Basically, just functioning as like a little bounce light for this area over here. So the focus is a little bit more on the daggers than it was previously. Or at least the hilts. This area is still pretty much dead. And I ended up scrapping the physical sky, but I figured I would start with it to see what it would do. So this I basically went through. This is like a similar setup you can see to the day where I have like I'm just using area lights for this. I'm more comfortable working with area lights because I'm a weirdo. But I'm using the same basic setup, you know, the little blinds and stuff are still there. Again, I just like the interesting shadows, totally optional. It is nice though as like a touch if you're doing, you know, like if you have bars on the window or something, like if you can use that shadow to like play across stuff or like give an interesting texture, that's a really fun way you can sort of play with light and shadow to enhance your scene or draw the eye around the scene. But the reason, so if I look at this render versus this one, the lights were in different places, but they ended up looking really similar, where you have this like one beam of light that's like pretty much coming across the same area. And I ended up switching that to be more obviously different for these later day renders so that it conveys more of the sort of light traveling across the sky. And in this case, I mean, you still have the shadows in a similar spot, but you have the more obvious shadow over here. And the reason that I did that is like, as you know, the world is spinning and all that good stuff, the light position in the sky changes. So it does make sense to have, you know, if you're rendering, say, at noon and at midnight, the light is going to be coming from different sort of areas in the sky, right? Or like morning versus noon. In the morning, the light is going to be coming from a more shallow angle, maybe from down here, sort of shining across. Whereas noon, the light tends to come from farther, and it's going to be shining down. So if you ever play with a physical sky, it's like pretty obvious if you mess with azimuth, that setting, it'll sort of show you how that works. But one thing, if I'm looking at the comparison of day and night lighting, that I actively look for is, does the light position change? Because it should be changing. So anywho, that was the sort of reason that I mentioned that I changed that. And then I just decided to go through and I was like, you know what if I add some more fill lights in here? This is perhaps a little bit aggressively dark. So I went in and I just added another little fill light. I did some weird stuff with the fill light on this one. I'm not entirely sure I like how it turned out. But it does brighten the scene a little bit, and there is still a clear, even though this is brighter, there is still a clear differentiation between the day and the night lighting in terms of, you know, color temperature and all of that good stuff. And that's the other thing that I wanted to talk about is color temperature. So lighting at night, there's like the blue and orange lighting fad that used to be a thing in movies like a few years ago, but blue lighting is generally more representational of night, whereas sort of white lighting is more of like the sort of daylight lighting. Like if you're looking at the, let's see if I have a thing. If you're looking at the color temperature, somewhere around 6500 K or Kelvin is usually where sort of daylight is. Bluer is going to be sort of, again, night, and then golden, reds, and oranges are going to be more sort of like sunsetty colors, or like morning, golden hour, that kind of thing. So that's another important thing to look at when you're doing day or night lighting, is also the color temperature and how that can sort of affect the scene. Because I mean, you can see, like, again, this is like way bluer and sort of like reddy, and this is just sort of like orange and very light yellow. And there's a very different sort of feel between these two renders. That is random UVs, and I think that was actually pretty much the only real differences I had here. So again, we have candle and nothing else, physical sky, which is like kind of a little awkward, a single area light, and then the candle, and then we have a few more area lights for fill light in that night scene. And it just depends. Like, honestly, I think I like this one better in terms of the lighting. But if you're trying to sort of show off the daggers, sometimes you need to maybe like punch in some extra lights, or also think about, you know, maybe there's a torch on the wall or like another candle. Is there, you know, another light you could add into your scene that contextually would make sense to lighten the scene, and also, you know, add in shadows and highlights and all that stuff into areas where you want them, in this case the daggers. And then same thing here. I mean, pretty much I was just like, I hate the positioning of the light, it's hideous. I changed it. And then I was like, I feel like I need a fill light. So yeah, I mean, that's basically the renders I had. I rendered them in advance so that my computer isn't being trash. Mwahaha. So I'll show you the different sort of scenes that I have, where, like I said, this is the whole scene. Because I'm using area lights for this and not a physical sky, it really doesn't matter in the slightest whether or not I have walls. Because that's not really going to affect anything. If you are using like an actual HDRI or a physical sky, you'd want to build out this whole room and then like add, you know, a proper window with a little portal light for it. Otherwise your renders are probably going to take 30 bazillion hours. But basically I just have a little a night light sort of weirdly off to the side. I usually do panels perspective or panels look through selected to position my lights, and I didn't realize that was so bizarrely off to the side. But this is my main night light that's casting the main sort of shadows in. And then what I've gone through and done is actually added two additional, these are my fill lights, and they're positioned really weird. They don't really make sense in the scene. I was just trying to do something quick, but I decided to set them up a little bit weird, where like I said, I have two versions of them. So this one, if we come down and we look at the visibility, I've turned the visibility on everything except specular off. Basically the effect I was trying to achieve is, hey, I only want this light to affect the daggers and like give them nice little specular highlights. And then for this one, I was like, well, it looks really weird if these daggers are super bright. So I just turned the specular off and this allowed me to sort of mess with the diffuse and how it affected everything else separately. So I could make that like a little bit dimmer, sort of adjust them individually. So alternatively, I could have used light linking for this. I was just sort of in a hurry, and I was like, well, this does what I need, so what the heck. But yeah, so like I said, that's my night setting. I basically have one light outside and these two weird little ones for the additional lighting that I wanted to come in. The day lighting is honestly a really similar setup. So there's a camera in my daylight. So I have a camera, and you can see that this one, whereas the night light was sort of positioned here and like pointing off to this direction, this one is doing the opposite, where it's coming from the left and going to the right. That's basically just where that thing is, and then I've just thrown another random area light just in the middle, not really in the middle, but like sort of coming from the wall. And that is, again, purely, it's not really there to like cast shadows or be a bright source of light, it is just there to act as like fake bounce light and sort of lighten the scene a little bit, because I thought it looked weird when the